Okay, welcome. I'm Julie Waits. I'm one of the partners in the franchise company, and I'd just like to welcome everyone today to our First Friday event, which is all about social franchising. And I'm absolutely delighted because we've been running these events now for about 4 years, and we've had a very wide variety and diverse type of content, but this is the first time that we've actually run an event which is to do with social franchising, which is something very dear and close to my heart, basically. So I'm going to lead off and just start with a bit of I guess, an intro and a background in terms of stuff that we've been doing and we've been working on, I've worked on over the past 20 odd years, basically. And I really just to share a variety of different brands. Most of them are brands that I've worked with, we've worked with, that are involved in the social sector. Some of them are located in the UK, probably majority in the UK, and they're looking to expand within the UK. Some of them are based internationally. There's a lady at the top who's run a brilliant organisation called Future Institute, who's based in Jeddah, and she's been providing training for females in Saudi Arabia for the last 30 years. So she's been through some challenges herself, basically. And obviously in there is Invisible Cities, which is Zakia, who's our guest today. The one that I'd like to really just mention first is probably for want of a better word, the flagship, is the Trussell Trust, which most people will potentially know and recognise as the leading provider of food banks in the UK. And the reason that I mention the Trussell Trust is that they really have been the trailblazer of social franchising in the UK, in my view, and started very much as an organisation aligned to and connected with churches, purely with the remit of providing food, sometimes surplus food, to people in the local community who had the need. And ultimately, because of the growth and the increasing growth of the need, whilst one of their strategic objectives initially was to actually not exist because they didn't want food poverty to be an issue, in fact, the opposite has happened. And because they have become the kind of leading stroke only organisation within the UK that's got a huge amount of information and data, that's actually put them in a position of massive influence with the government. So ultimately the government started coming to them for data and information, and there's been a bit of a trade in terms of, yes, we can provide you with the data, but actually this is what we need back from you. And so they've become very much the kind of trusted provider within the food poverty sector. And they've really opened the doors for lots of other social enterprises to follow. In terms of just some very basic background structure, again, social franchising has got lots of very similarities, alignments to business franchising, and the key points are the organisation generally is obviously looking to achieve impact. It's got social impact and purpose. Like a business, it's got to be ready to grow and scale systems, etc. And like a business, it's got to be sustainable. In the business sector, we talk about profit. In the social sector, we talk about sustainability. And again, one of the interesting points is that in social franchising, the support of the network and the support provided to the network and to franchisees is really a key part of the franchise model. So again, there's lots of similarities, and I'm delighted that the work that we've done historically in the business sector has enabled us to work with organisations in the social sector to help them grow. So on that basis, I will hand over to our guest for the day, who is Zakia from Invisible Cities. I'm going to control the PowerPoint for Zakia, but over to you, Zakia, to take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. I hope everybody can hear me and see the slide perfect. If that changes, just give me a shout, let me know. And I'm delighted to be here and talk a little bit about our story and what we do, how we do it, and then what our growth has looked like, which has included social franchising and receiving a lot of support from Julie, in particular, to look at that and what that means for the work that we do in the UK, but also what that means for the plans that we will have moving forward. So if we can go on to the first slide, please. To give you a little bit of background to start with, I'm based in Edinburgh in Scotland, that I made my home now 17 years ago. And my background was personally in events, but also with organisations, funnily enough, that Julie, you mentioned on the slides. So people like The Big Issue, but also Homeless World Cup, which is a network of street soccer, street football organisations. So I was very aware of organisations that supported people experiencing homelessness around the world, but supported them in maybe out of the box ways. So not in your traditional way of providing food and shelter and clothing, but also went beyond that with training, entrepreneurship opportunities, and maybe, you know, activities like sports and football. And so my intention when setting up Invisible Cities was to create an organisation that could support people experiencing homelessness in the UK, but also could break down the stigma that exists, sadly, still around homelessness. And so, because every time I would say to someone, you know, I work with people who come from all walks of lives and have all different kinds of stories, and people who are homeless, out of prison, have been, you know, in different institutions. There was a lot of questioning from people around me around what that was like, what that looked like. And I realized that the picture we have of a homeless person or somebody experiencing homelessness is quite often what we see on the screen. But actually what I wanted, moving on to the next slide, was to showcase that somebody experiencing homelessness could also look like this. And it didn't have to be one story fits all. Everybody has a different story and life, you know, to share. And sadly, homelessness can and does happen to anyone at any one point, and you don't need to just fit into one stereotypes. So that's exactly what we do at Invisible City. So in 2016, going beyond just thinking about what could I do to support people, I realized that, you know, travel and tourism was probably a good space to start an organization, because the power of travel, I believe, is that you meet a lot of different people and you can really create meaningful connections. And so Invisible Cities was born out of those reflections and wanting to put the two together, because ultimately what we do is that we train people who have experienced homelessness so they can become tour guides of their own city. So the picture that you saw a second ago transforms into the picture that you have now on the screen. Somebody has indeed experienced homelessness, but is now a tour guide with us. Do you want to move on to the next slide, please? So that's very much the principle of what we do. We recruit people through a variety of organisations that may be providing more practical support, food, places of accommodation, shelters, you know, places that may offer different things in the city. And we ask that The Big Issue, for example, might refer people onto us that are their vendors, so sell the magazines on the streets of different cities. And we ask them who they have that may be interested in training further with us and potentially becoming tour guides. Unlike other organizations, I think what we do is we train first. We offer our training program as a way for people to develop skills and learn together, and then we hire second. But we employ people to deliver tours. We pay them a living wage. We're a living wage employer. And as part of the training process, guides also design their own tours, which means that all of a sudden they can talk about things that they feel passionate about. They talk about things that are relevant to them. We don't put words in people's mouths, but instead have stories on our tours that are authentic to the people who deliver them, but sometimes are also maybe harder hitting than what you might find in other tour operators. So it might talk about things like mental health, it might talk about things like addiction, but it will also talk about things like support services, about underrepresented communities. And because everybody has their own tour, they feel empowered and proud of the tour that they put up in our city. So starting in 2016, obviously I started in Edinburgh by really testing and piloting what that would look like and how we could work with services and organizations referring people onto us, but also how we could work with people in travel and tourism. And since then have expanded what we do, not only in Edinburgh, but through the UK. And in 2021, we were really proud to have Lonely Planet award us Best Community Tour in the World for their Best in Travel list. And we've been recognised and working with a lot of people in the travel sector, like National Geographics, but also, different media channels, travel bodies, foundations, organisations, network enablers, to the point where now we have 21 guides across our different cities that tour and work regularly with us, but we've trained over 135 people now. So always on the same principle and the same basis of what I just mentioned, which is offering our training first and then employing people who have done the training with us to become tour guides. Moving on. So the training was something that, in terms of travel and tourism, that I didn't know about. So my background, as I said, working with other organizations and people, was more on the support and homelessness kind of side of things. But working in as a tour operator, I thought, what are the skills and what are the things that guides probably need? And asking other tour operators, other tour guides, organizations, DMOs, so that would be people like Visit Britain, Visit Scotland. The feedback was confidence, being personable, being likable. So we focused a lot of our training on what we call those life skills and confidence building, public speaking, customer service, which are things that you need regardless of the job you're going to end up having. But of course are quite relevant to tour guiding. We do a lot of familiarization with our cities as well. We go to a lot of galleries and venues and places and monuments together. And we do a lot of history as well. And as I said, part of the training is also building your own tour and being a storyteller. But rather than for Invisible Cities to do the training directly, what we do is we will tap into a wide network of travel and tourism partners who will do that training with us or for us. So, for example, when we do customer service, teams from different hotels might be the ones delivering that training. So internally, a concierge team from a 5-star hotel might already have internal training when it comes to what you do when a customer walks through the door. So they're not delivering anything innovative or new. They're just delivering their own internal training to our team. And what it does for them is that it provides them with an opportunity to give back to their community, they feel. And for us, it means we have world-class training with teams that are really good at what they do. So 135 people have taken part in our training to date. Not all of them become guides, as I said. We have a very easy stat for me to remember, because it's about 25% of people end up becoming guides with us and gaining direct employment. But 25% move on directly to other things. So they've gained confidence, they've kind of familiarized themselves with travel and tourism in our city. And so they might gain, employment in a hotel, in a cafe, go back to school, whatever it may be. And then for the other 50%, it's a mixed bag of people who stay involved with us but are still not quite ready to become guides. And then about 10-15% of people who can completely disengage. So it's a fair mix. But the result of that is, as a social enterprise, as an organization, what we are able to sell and provide and for us to be able to sustain ourselves is the tours, because part of the training, and next slide please, the tours are our number one product that come from our training and reflect, as I said, the stories, but also the likes and dislikes of our guides in all of our cities. So we cover themes from crime, punishment, Black history, women representation, LGBTQ plus communities, but also purely historical tours to more football related tours, music tours, whatever the person is actually passionate about in all our different locations. And so as a social enterprise, I think what's really important to me and to us is that we are equally a support organization for people who have experienced homelessness and equally a tour operator. So when I introduce what we do at Invisible Cities, depending on the crowds that I've got in front of me, I will either say social organization, not-for-profit, social enterprise, or I will simply say we're a tour operator. So that what you understand is that what we do is we sell tours. We sell tickets to walking tours, and this is how we sustain ourselves as a business. Obviously, when starting in 2016, and then along the way with periods, you know, of COVID, and then depending on certain times of the year, it might be that we also fund ourselves through maybe different partnership works. Maybe we design a tour with a local authority. Maybe we work on a sponsored tour and we access certain pots of funding like grants to be able to sustain the work that we do. So in terms of the income, it's a very mixed bag of different things, but the number one and the priority for us, the number one item is our tours and being able to sell as many tours as possible. Next slide, please. And all of the work that we do together then, makes our impact, which is actually more than two ways. It's actually three ways. One, for our guides, the skills that we provide them, the confidence that we're able to raise in them, but also the networks and kind of sociability side of things for them. And then, as I mentioned very early on, you know, the breaking down the stigma that exists around homelessness for our customers and our guests. So the people who do come on the tours are a very even bag between travelers, international travelers and tourists, but also locals and residents who want to do something locally to rediscover the place that they're in, especially since COVID. A lot of people want to do something where they don't necessarily have to travel very far, but that can bring them an experience that's unusual and out of the ordinary. So we work a lot with universities, for example, schools, but also corporate teams for team away days or networking sessions or awareness raising sessions, no matter what it is. But we also work equally, and that's probably a very even split, you know, if not 50-50, probably 60% of travelers and 40% of local residents and kind of local business. And then in terms of the travelers, we have a lot of organic traffic where we have people who we call the conscious travelers, who are people who want to do something local, ethical, with impact on the ground, but also a lot of tour operators, you know, a lot of incentive travel. So that may be people who come to Scotland for 3-4 days and want to do something out of the beaten track and go beyond the postcard and learn and feel for the place that they visit. So yes, next slide, please. To go back on our story, when I started back in 2016, it was obviously just me and a couple of people that had experienced homelessness and wanted to do the training and really supported in designing what training to become a tour guide for them could look like in partnership with a lot of people in the travel and tourism sector. And once we had our first tour being publicized on our website and being sold, we started having an equal mix of organic traffic and kind of support from larger organizations like Visit Scotland to help us sell tours on a bigger scale. What started happening is people from other cities in the UK mostly started coming onto tours and say, I'm from Manchester, I'm from Glasgow, have you thought about doing this there as well? So organic organically, the demand for us growing kind of started happening. Similarly, from homelessness organisations who heard about us. Because I had a connection with the Big Issue, we've always had great coverage from them. And great support and kind of raising awareness about what we want to do. So they've been able to spread the word, write articles about us. So that's been wonderful. But organically, I started making connections into different locations and quickly realized that we had the potential of growing into more than just Invisible Edinburgh, than just local tours in Edinburgh. So in 2018, the Big Issue, I approached the Big Issue Invest, which is the investment arm of the Big Issue Group, and they run social impact driven investment program where you can have a look at your business, you can have a look at your financial model, you can have a look at your marketing and also your plan for growth. And so in 2018, I applied for investment, and together we looked at making the tours in Edinburgh more sustainable with the plan of replicating those across the UK, first directly. So the initial plan was to do that without a social franchising model. But after being successful through that, what happened was that it was clearly evident that because of who we work with, people who may still face very complex needs and challenges, replicating what we do in a city where you're not necessarily based, where the one-to-one support and human contact wasn't always happening, was really, really difficult. So organically, we grew to Glasgow. I was able to hire a member team in Glasgow and a member team in Manchester. So Edinburgh, Glasgow, and Manchester were the cities where we started first to grow. And then from then on, it became apparent that it wasn't doable with that model, and came into the picture social franchising as a possibility. Because, as I said, the support to recruit, train, and then support people into employment needs to be done physically and on the ground at a local level. It made sense, socially speaking, for us to go into a social franchise model. In terms of business, it also made sense. So it was in 2019, I think, that we worked together with Julie to look at the model and see how we could replicate what we do using a social franchising model. So since then, have expanded to York, Cardiff, and the Scottish borders using exactly that model. And then moving forward, that's all we're going to be using to expand to further cities, not only in the UK but also abroad. And again, I think I said that very quickly. As a social enterprise, we are a not-for-profit. We're a community interest company, for those who may know what that means. But it means that, we trade and sell, and it's very important for us to generate as much of our own income as possible. But we are equally in wanting to support, recruit, and work with people who are experiencing homelessness or have that experience, and as a result have challenges like mental health issues, may have no connection with family and friends, may have addiction issues, have been long-term unemployed, etc. But equally, we are in the travel business, and what we want to do in the travel business is revolutionize how you do a walking tour. It doesn't have to be only about the history you can find online or you can find in a guidebook. I think it's going beyond that and discovering our cities as they are. So when we look at expanding into a new place, we look for a partner that can become that franchisee and that can live and embody that ethos of equally being social and travel, and that can do things the same way we do things, and understand our way of moving forward. Next slide, please. So over the years, since 2019, obviously we've had a strange period of lockdowns and COVID and things like that. So things have slowed down, but we've been, reacting to a lot of demand and interest from fellow organisations, a lot of that coming from the homelessness sector in different parts of the country. So maybe a charity or is looking at ways that they can support the people they already support with accommodation a little bit further, and what they want to do is provide them with employment, which is the case for our franchisee in Cardiff, for example, is a homelessness charity called The Wallet. They do a lot of outreach, a lot of very practical support, you know, food parcels, accommodation, rehabilitation services, etc. But the piece that was missing for them was a way to provide direct practical opportunities for the people that they were working with. And so being able to train people to become tour guides and to train people in the cultural and heritage sector was quite important. So that's one example of doing things, but it could be that somebody's already, you know, in the social enterprise sector or in the travel sector as well, and wants to do things differently from what they're already doing, so they see the value in what we do. Over the years, you know, we've built a brand that is recognizable for the alternative tours that we do and the work we do with people. And so I think that the number one attraction for people to be part of the Invisible Cities family, as we call it, is the reputation we've gained on the quality of our tours, but also the quality of our work, hopefully. So a big part of the work that I do today, now that I've built a team along the way, is working on that brand and that reputation for franchisees, potential franchisees, to be interested in that as well, and to be able to get, you know, some positivity out of it as well. But as we grow, you know, a lot of the things we do, I see it as growing Invisible Cities is all about replicating the things that work in one of our cities into all the different cities. So, for example, a few years back, when Ukrainian citizens started coming into the UK and Edinburgh was host to a few people, a lot of our guides locally said, you know, what I would really like to do is to be able to provide tours to Ukrainian people when they come to Edinburgh, because I want them to love the city as much as I do, and I would really like to do that. And if I can do that for free, that would be great. Now, I think as a business, we can't really have people work on for free. We need to pay for their time, and that means we can't really offer free tours. So we developed a model of a pay it forward tour, for example, in the city of Edinburgh, first completely aimed at Ukrainian refugees. And that had so much of a success that now we have all of our other cities going to replicate that for communities locally. And so essentially what we say to Cardiff and to York and to Glasgow is to say, you know, here is an activity that we do. Why don't you do it? See how that works, what that means for you, the challenges that you find, and then are able to all benefit from the very positive PR we may get out of it, but also the positive impact that we have and the connections that it may bring. So after 8 years and a good few of that, you know, being a social franchise model and using that model as a way to grow, you know, we're able to really benefit from it, I think, and see the results of all of that in terms of the work that we do with community tours, but also with other campaigns and maybe more public facing things that we do as well. So on to the next slide, I wanted to also mention a campaign that came from one of our franchisees, which was York, who are delivering walking tours. And in 2019, early 2020, they were thinking about doing a campaign in the city of York only to raise awareness about homelessness. And of course about the tours, but primarily, you know, with the aim of just raising awareness of homelessness. And so created these posters that they had all over the city. And they had another one which was, I always forget what it says because this one is always my favorite, but after a couple of days those were removed from the streets by, we suspect, the council. But they had generated a little bit of interest online and on social media. So what we did is decided that we were going to do that at a national level. So replicated what they did in York into all our cities at the time, obviously in collaboration and, you know, and discussing that and brainstorming it all the time. But so we had these posters in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Manchester and York as a bit of a guerrilla marketing campaign, and had them put on by a team of volunteers and a lot of people taking photographs of them. And then after a couple of days, similarly, they were removed from the streets, but they had started getting traction online. And so since 2020, those posters have been seen on social media by over 2.2 million people, have been reshared. And they were picked up by a couple of marketing agencies as a great example of raising a social message into the public sphere. And every so often they come back to me, which is quite funny. So somebody on LinkedIn will say, have you seen these posters? It feels that this is something you guys should do. And I always have to say, yes, we do know them. And I think what I love so much about it is obviously this is at the core, the message and the ethos of who we are and what we do. We raise awareness and we want to talk about homelessness in a way that is upfront and that raises, you know, the issues that it has. And of course, the implication of that is you come on a tour and our organization can grow, but it has served us so well to just put that message out there without much expectation in return. In total, the campaign of having the posters cost us less than £60 because we didn't have that many put on the streets. It took us some work to share them around, but it has had incredible results that today I think comes back to us. And I think the biggest and the best kind of compliment is that people know how this relates to our brand and to our way of working. They associate the two together. And for me, I think that's the best that could have happened on the shoestring, but also being creative and kind of listening to what a potential franchisee would do and replicating that at a more national level. So now when we welcome new partners and when we welcome new franchisees, you know, that's what we sell as well, and that's the story we tell, which is, you know, we want to operate as one, and obviously we will support you to be as successful as possible, because together we have more strength and power to not only raise awareness, but to support more and more people. And so that's where our plans for the future come in with the next slide, which is we are at a stage now, so we're 8 years old and have been operating the social franchise since 2019, and run exactly the same, you know, I think in all our cities. But we're really excited to start having, I think I've really identified the need now for somebody to come in as a bit of a network franchise manager and to be able to be the person sitting with me outside of all the different cities and really encourage this collaboration between cities and between franchisees, and for Invisible Cities to feel as a much more coherent national organizations rather than different local organizations that may have the same brand and may have the same feel and activities, but you know, are not really communicating with each other. So from August, it's all brand new, we'll have somebody doing that, which is really exciting. And we've really seen a shift. So I think in our story of being a very local Edinburgh based and then maybe Scotland based and then national organizations through the social franchising model, now we really are described and feel and operate as a national organization that is able to attract brands that come in, and we have partners and sponsors that want to come in at that national level, and for them to have access to all the different cities and parts of the UK we're in. So in the next 2 years, we're planning on expanding into the UK a bit more, with new cities joining us as franchisees, but also looking at what an international franchise would look like already. And one thing I would say is when we work together with the franchise company, with Julie in particular, you know, we already spoke about it, I remember, and the dreams and what that would look like. And And over the years, I think that plan has been refined, and we've been able to find our space better into what an international franchise would look like. And it's been a very interesting work to do and to plan for. And what I mean plan for and do is looking at who the partners we could have internationally are, who are the brands we could associate with, who are the charities we could tap into, and rather than being reacting to demand and interest, being proactive in our research for potential franchisees and potential cities and potential countries. And so that's the work we've started doing, which I think was only possible to actively do now that we are a national organisation as opposed to different localized areas coming together. So we really behave and operate like that in everything that we do now, in the way we share ideas for tours, in the way we replicate our training, in our uniform, you know, down to all of our operations. And though a lot of that existed in 2019, you know, we've really made it a point at emphasizing that more and more, and then really looking at areas where we were maybe different from city to city as opposed to a national organization. So onto the next slide, for example, I put it out there, but it's just as an example. We're currently having a bit of a campaign to reach different groups that are maybe harder for us to reach, and that may be people who come from refugee backgrounds, people who come from organizations where training is not very much at the forefront of their mind. But that campaign has been designed as a national organization for us. And we've, thanks to the crowdfunder and the money we're raising through this campaign and through this operation, will have a bit of a fund where a franchisee in York, a franchisee in Cardiff might be able to say, you know, I want to organize a free tour for this group, and obviously still need to support my costs and support my operations. So can I tap into the pot of money you raised? And we'd be able to say yes or no, and for that to happen. So it's just a simple example of how now we look at it that way. And that's the model we will also have moving forward. I think this is where I'll stop. Thank you very much. I'm super happy to have any question. What I wanted to do is really give you an overview of all the things that have happened, but also that maybe very honest journey through what social franchising looked like for us, which was very much figuring out what we were doing as a social enterprise and what the impact that we were having was, and what the impact we wanted to have could be, but also what our commercial entity was, and taking that further without forgetting to learn along the way if it meant we had to adapt a little bit to what we were doing. So that's our story in a nutshell, and please do feel free to ask any questions.
Great, thank you, Zakia. I mean, hopefully everyone that's been on the call today has started booking tours already, but I think everyone will recognise the amazing work that you've done and the energy that you bring to the organisation, Zakia, and say from my point of view, just thankful for the ability to support you through the journey. So open to the floor. Questions, please. Simon, I can see you've unmuted yourself.
Yeah, do you know what? I think it's appropriate to go on record to recognise the work that you've done, Julie, over the years, because your support for this sector has been consistent, and I think you need to be congratulated for that, because these enterprises are fantastic. They really are. And so anyway, that I just wanted to go on record for that. In terms of the franchisee avatar, I mean, what does that look like? What does the franchisee avatar look like for you?
So I concur, and I think, you know, Julie was a big part of that journey for us, and on the first point that you made, and I think it's definitely a key time in our growth from that small local single organization to a more national one. So it needs to be recognized. In terms of who the franchisees are, so the profile I have found over the years is either coming from the charity social sector, a charity that works within homelessness already, so the social aspect of our work is already known to them, and what they want to focus on is either the income generation, so be able to create more income for the work that they do, or the providing more opportunities for the people they already work with. And in that case, when that is that case, what I plan for is that we'll probably need to apply for funding together. We'll probably need to work closely to get to a point where we are franchise ready for them. But the other the other possibility is people coming from the travel and tourism sector that want to diversify who they work with. And in that case, you know, they may be more on board with selling a tour, what a tour looks like, what your customer profiles are, you know, their sales channels, all of that. But working with people with an experience of homelessness is the difficult part for them. So it's either or.
And what about the what about the commercial sector? Because, you know, companies, for example, that want to make an investment or want to take their I would call it corporate social responsibility, but I think that's probably outdated now, isn't it? Would you be open to more corporate people coming in as franchisees? Because I guess the danger is if your franchisee is reliant on funding to sustain themselves, I mean, that could have a long-term impact on the legacy of what you're doing. So I'm thinking maybe a more commercial operation that comes in that really wants to get further embedded in their local community. This could be an opportunity for them as well.
Yes, it's 100% an opportunity for them, and we've been actively trying to get more of those on board. But what tends to happen is it's not so much coming in as a franchisee, it's more of a sponsor of a franchise or a commercial partner of a franchise. So the space where we still need to recruit an organization or somebody to do the practical work of working with people, of recruiting them, of training them, that still needs to happen. So, and that's maybe just an observation from me, is that, so we're working now with a few brands, big or small, doesn't matter, but who see the value in that for their corporate social responsibility, for the positive PR, for wanting to generally make an impact in their local communities and sectors. But it's incredibly hard to work with people who've experienced homelessness. So there comes a point where we all talk about the limitations of that. And if you're going to do work that is good for the people that you do it for, you do need to bring in a partner that can do that work, if that makes sense. So it's more of a coalition rather than a single corporate partner that can become the franchisee.
Yeah, and I think, Simon, if I can just add to that, really one of the key differences between business franchising and social franchising is that to a large degree, social franchisees aren't individuals. To a large degree, they are either existing social enterprises that, you know, take the franchise as an add-on to what they do, or they establish themselves as a social enterprise to take the franchise. And I think part of that is because of the, you know, the mindset in the social sector to some degree is different, that social enterprises are used to being to some degree funding dependent and work in that space on the basis that this funding runs out then, so we need to start applying for more funding that comes in after that, whereas individuals are really looking for a sustainable income and something that can be built as a capital asset, whereas again in the social sector, without going into the detail, if you're established as a KIC, you're asset locked, so you can't build that capital asset. So there are some key differences, but there's lots of similarities as well.
I'm sorry, Clarissa's waiting to get in, but because of that aspect, does that mean the franchise agreements are a lot shorter because they are linked to funding?
Again, franchise agreements can be a lot shorter in a similar way to the business sector. To some degree, it depends upon who the target franchisee is. And the reality is, you know, if you're trying to get a local authority to sign up to a social franchise agreement that's 90 pages long, it's not going to happen basically because it's going to be deemed to be too onerous. So social franchise agreements tend to be simpler, straightforward, and to some degree tend to be more, I feel like, an expression of intent rather than necessarily a document that will be heavily defended although those documents do exist basically. But yes, largely they are simpler documents. Clarissa, if you'd like to join us, Clarissa's just joined Makaton and comes from a background in the business sector. So welcome, Clarissa, and over to you.
Thank you. Hello. Really interesting. As Julie just says, I spoke to Julie a little while ago because I've moved out of sort of the sort of standard corporate franchising model into social franchising with Makaton. Who, for anyone who's unsure what that is, it's the communication system. So it's a mixture of signs and symbols for people to better communicate with others in all walks of life. So they've got a huge tutor network that they're trying to turn into a social franchise, so that it has better impact, so that all the needs are met in different areas and that sort of thing. I guess I'm just curious in terms of, you've talked a lot about funding. The charity works in a very different model in that it does take some kind of annual fee from its franchisees. And I just wondered if you use a similar model once someone joins as a franchisee, are you still taking a fixed annual fee or a proportional percentage-based fee from them in order to maintain that? And what does that look like for your guys?
So it's a really good question. So our model is a one-off fee when you become a franchisee, which we start. So currently is at £10,000. It started lower than that, but obviously as we grow and build, it increased. And then we take a royalty fee onto sales of tours and anything related to the tours. So that may be applying to merchandise, for example, as well, which is 15%. Of that, and that's ongoing and forever on. So when it comes to employing, it depends how things are done. That's the basic of the contract. And then a partner, so a franchise decides, and all of them have decided that they'll pay directly team and their guides, but they could decide that we pay that, and in that case we would need to come into a different agreement when it comes to employing and paying the guides. But so far that hasn't happened. So but it could be, it's definitely something we've actually discussed and kind of brainstormed in the past, the direct employment of all the guides. For example, to go back to our franchisee in Cardiff, they are employed and directly paid by them, and so they give us our fee and our one-off fee, of course, but the kind of regular 15% is taken off before anything else happens. So but again, I think to go back to the point that Julie just made, I think there's a lot of, I don't know if that's as flexible as in the commercial franchising as well world. I think there's a bit more flexibility when it comes to that. So we look at the partner, who they are, how big they are, and how we work together. And of course, there's a commercial agreement that we enter with the one-off fee and the royalties and the percentage afterwards. But we've definitely discussed other aspects, like the employment of the guides, like other things that they can tap into, depending of whether they're a charity, if they're a kick, if they're small, if they're big, and with our franchisee in York, for example, we discussed things like insurance and what made more sense for whom to do what. So I feel like that's a flexibility, and that's an ongoing conversation that we have. We renew our contracts every year. I don't know if that's any helpful, and that's the time of the year where we can discuss all of these things. And of course we discuss the growth and how big we've come, and very practical items, but also how we move forward with things. So if something was to change because of whatever, then that's probably the time it would be brought up, and we would look at that and kind of include it or not in the next contract. But at the moment, that's the way our social franchise model kind of works, which is with the one-off fee that unlocks everything, and then once stores are up and running, with the kind of royalty percentage that comes back to Invisible Cities.
And again, Clarissa, just to add from my experience working in the sector, when I meet people for the first time, they tend to either have a vision of something that's very loose, woolly, friendly, and realistically unsustainable, because they'll say we don't need to charge a fee, or we don't need to charge any ongoing fees, or they might have a kind of mini McDonald's in the mind with such levels of rigidity that that's not going to work either. So again, it's bringing it together and blending it and understanding what the needs are, and ultimately, you know, in the same way that we look to achieve commercial success in the commercial sector, we look for the organisations to be sustainable and achieve the social impact in the social sector as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a stigmatism that everything's free when you're giving back, but it's very much, which is what we're trying to develop.
Yes. And I think the tool, that's 100% true. And so what started happening is when we introduced the social franchise model, there was not a lot of backlash, but some backlash as to why that was the case, especially in the charity sector, even more so in the homelessness sector, that ultimately if you're doing it for the greater good of other people, it should all be for free. And then you have to, and I think it's a great tool though to then introduce the conversation around the fact that we do need to be sustainable, we need to generate our own income. I have a team to support, I need to be paying their salaries, and so, and it cuts out those that are potential, you know, leads and real partners you can work with, and those who are never going to go to anything like that. And if they just assume and, you know, are against all of that, then you know, you're never going to work with them. But then there is a mix of organizations and people and potentials that you need to have that conversation with, and you can come to that together, hence the flexibility, I think, and the discussion. And I think that a really great, I think it's a really positive point, is that it's like discovering one another time, right? So once you, maybe whether we get approached or approach an organization, discussing all these things mean that we can really evaluate whether we are a good fit or not for each other. And that's when all those points come together. But I 100% agree with you that there is an expectation sometimes that it should be free, or that fees should stop, or if you're starting something, you shouldn't be paying anything, and that doesn't really work for our organization. So, you know, it kind of, it's a way of triaging everything, and I think that's quite a positive thing.
That's brilliant.
Thank you.
Sorry, just a quick one. I've got a friend of mine, actually. His name's Tim West. He's the founder of Pioneer Post and the Fabled Bureau. I don't know whether you're familiar with them at all. Have you connected with them? Are they supporting what you're doing in terms of communication?
No, I'm very aware of them through other events and things. I think that, you know, we've crossed paths, shall we say, but we don't have direct support from them. I would love to be connected to him or to them if you can.
Yes,
that would be
I'll
wonderful.
be very, very pleased to. It goes to Clarissa as well, because they have all sorts of things. They organise the awards as well as Women in Social Enterprise Network, and they have the Good Ideas Conference as well, which is, you know, just as we have in the commercial franchise, an opportunity to network and share ideas and thoughts with other people as well. So yeah, I'll be happy to do that. I'll do it through Julie, of course.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you, Simon.
So I'm aware that time's moving on. Has anyone got any other thoughts, contributions, suggestions, ideas, anything they'd like to share before we wrap up for our August event? I think in terms of, you know, final thoughts, this is Zakia's final slide, and you know, if that's a good thought for the weekend, if it was the only language I speak fluently, then let's all hope we're speaking fluently over the weekend and having a good weekend, basically. So again, as always, really like to thank Zakia for the time and the effort, and just a gentle reminder that in September we're kind of going back to the commercial sector, but we're in a space that benefits everyone, whether you're in the social sector or when you're in the commercial sector. And our guest is Neil Newman, and Neil's runs an organisation called We Gather, and basically the organisation is looking at customer service and gathering data, and predominantly started in the care sector and used to do quality assurance basically in the care sector, and is now moving further into the franchising sector. And we're working with Neil and hopefully helping him to expand the word to the great work that they do in the system that they've got in the franchise sector. So hopefully see you all in September. And in the meantime, again, if anyone that hasn't been on holidays yet to go on holiday, have a great time. For those of us who've already been on holiday, then here we are in August, but at least we've got the sun shining. And have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Julie.
Yes,
Thank you, Zakia.
care.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.